Yo, what's up? It's your boy, it's the Insane Game Freeze. Get so many back here with some more Black Clover video. So, I think I should have put it in the title. I'm going to start off with it. Spoiler warning, if you're not caught up with the manga, we're going to discuss some theory crafting that's been going on due to the recent information in chapter, I think it's 285. So if you haven't watched Black Clover, read up to that chapter, don't watch the video. Because we're going to be talking about our favorite, which is funny because tomorrow is when he debuts in the anime. So it's kind of funny in that respect that like I'm talking about it now, but like tomorrow, Tuesday, since the episode comes out, is the first episode he appears as like a new character. So I'm a little bummed out because it doesn't let the color palettes dark enough for that episode, by the way. Considering how dark it felt in the manga, I don't feel like it's going to have the same vibe in the anime, which bums me out because it's a pretty, like, depressing, dark sequence, but whatever. So let's talk about recent events. So, if you've read up to chapter 285, you know that we've been dealing with, like, Nacht, dealing with the two devils, and the part that I really want to address is his backstory. Because we're starting, at the end of the chapter, we started getting his flashback. And the big reveal at the end of the chapter about his flashback is that the person who has the name Nacht does not look like the guy who currently has the name Nacht. Now we know Nacht has a brother based off of the earlier chapters of the manga. And we know that his brother and him were kind of known because Jack recognizes him. But when you look at the flashback, the guy who looks like current Nacht is called Morgan, and the guy who's called Nacht looks like a guy we've never seen before because technically we haven't. Now, if you're a Black Clover fan and you've read the manga, because I don't think the anime ever showed it, in the manga, there's a sequence in chapter 2 talking about the Black Bull showing off various different characters and like silhouettes next to Yami. And throughout the story, that silhouette thing has been pretty consistent. Give you an example. Henry is shown in that back thing early on, which is interesting because Henry wasn't introduced until way later. He wasn't introduced until like the beginning of the like elf invasion arc, right? But Henry's shown in that silhouette. Almost every character now we can match a name to the silhouette. I think Magna's in there, Luck's in there, Gray's in there, Gordon's in there, Henry's in there. But there was one character we could never pin down who it was. And for the longest time I thought it was Charmy. Because that was the only character who we known had been in the Black Bulls. Oh, and Vanessa's in there too. We can see Vanessa's silhouette. There were all these other characters shown off, but like that one character wasn't shown. And for the longest time, I thought it was Charmy, especially once we found out she had like a dwarf form. But that's not what that is. It's not her. Well, you find out, and if you look at Nacht's old design, you notice that, that looks pretty fucking close to the silhouette that we saw back in chapter 2. So the theory that's been going around is that supposedly the character called Morgan, who looks like current Nacht in the flashback, has probably died, and it's probably a case of what we like to call, if you're a Sked Dance fan, you know you've already seen this plotline before. A character who died, and then the character who lived pretty much took on the appearance and identity of that person. And that's when it turns into like, boom, okay, so the current Nacht the name is consistent. He is Nacht, but he's taken on the appearance of his brother Morgan. And that's the theory a lot of people have going around because it's pretty telegraphed. Now Tabata, although is not like the most catching you off guard with some shit, Arthur, he does have his moments, and usually when his flashbacks hit, they're not just as like basic or straight laced as one would think. Considering he's slowly been building up this Nacht flashback shit since he's been introduced in the manga, I don't feel like it's a simple story of, oh, something happened, Morgan died, and so Nacht out of guilt took his appearance. Especially once you notice in the flashback, it's like the only flashback I think we've seen other than his kid flashback that Yami isn't smoking. We also notice that Yami and Morgan in the flashback are wearing Golden Deer outfits. This is important or not golden. It's I'm thinking of Fire Emblem. I think it's Gray Deer. They're wearing Gray Deer outfits, which we know from other. I think it's from some of the filler, and it's also been mentioned before that like I think Julius, Yami, and William all came from the Gray Deer. Julius became Wizard King, and then Yami and William got promoted to become captains. But in this point in time, based off the flashback, it looks like they're still like Gray Deer members. So this takes place before Julius becomes Wizard King, or at least before Yami and William are promoted. And we know that, and based off the other flashback, we know that Yami and Nacht, or Yami and Morgan work together in the Gray Deer because they're currently both in the Gray Deer. So I don't think it's as straightforward as, oh, something happened with Morgan, Nacht out of guilt took his appearance. Because the one thing that's also interesting is that Nacht used to smoke. You see in the flashback, he's smoking. So why did Yami take... It seems like Yami at some point took up Nacht's old habit of smoking and supposedly, like, Nacht stopped started looking like his brother. His twin brother, which is important. I don't think it's the same Sket Dance case. I think it's probably even deeper than that. I think realistically that Morgan is actually Nacht. What I mean by that is I don't think there was any appearance changing. I think what I really think happened is that Nacht actually died. Nacht originally died, and Morgan took on his name, and probably a little bit of his personality. Because if you notice, Nacht, like Morgan in the flashback, it's so hard to say this without confusing people. But Morgan, the guy who looks like current Nacht, has more of a like upbeat, I want to be a part of the Magic Knights, like I want to help people. And then Nacht, his brother, seems more like, fuck that, I'm just doing whatever the hell I want to do. And if you look at the Nacht in the current timeline of the manga, he acts more like Nacht in the past, not Morgan, which is what he looks like. This is going to be super confusing. I imagine pictures need to be put up like a motherfucker. Whether I do that or not, I don't know, because new chapter comes out in a couple of days, and it's going to be a whole thing if I don't get this out in time. But the point I'm making is I think it's more so that Morgan is Nacht, meaning the appearance is consistent, but Morgan took his brother's name, Nacht, and portrays himself as that. Especially because if you notice, Nacht's whole thing in the current timeline has been like how he can't stand unjust evil. He doesn't like evil in general, but he keeps saying specifically unjust evil. He doesn't forgive unjust evil. He even likes Asta, although he actively hates Yami. I very much believe that in this flashback we are going to find that the original Nacht, through his actions and probably a combination of Yami's also, barring with something with the devils, ended up fucking up getting Morgan killed. I mean, getting the original Nacht killed. And Morgan became very angry and disillusioned with Yami, but like, because it's hard because the flashback showed, like the chapter 2 flashback shows someone who looks more like Morgan. I don't think it's as straightforward as, oh, someone died and then out of guilt they changed appearances. I very much believe I think there was a gap in time. I think very much like it's going to start here and then like it's going to span a little while, but it's going to be pretty early in the Black Bull's life cycle because no one seems to recognize Nacht. The only person who I think actively recognizes him is fucking Jack. And then there's like a casual mention from from Julius, but Julius kind of says it in a way that makes it sound like he's only kind of aware. He's not like as fully aware as you would think. And I very much believe this was something that was hidden because no one ever brings up the Forgotten Faust family or any of that shit. Like it's like the way it's portrayed in the manga makes me think that like whatever happened with these two brothers and Yami is somewhat unknown. The only reason why Jack recognizes them is because, remember, Yami and Morgan were in the same group, so the appearance looks like Morgan. He also doesn't even mention the fact that, that name doesn't sound right. He mentions that you didn't have shadow magic. That's what he says. He goes, Nacht didn't have shadow magic. He didn't go, you don't look like Nacht. That's what he should have said, because Nacht looked very different. So then my thought process, and then the fact that people bring up their German meaning of their names, that Nacht means night, but Morgan means morning, even though it's shown that like Nacht was the one with the white hair and Morgan was the one with the black hair, which is a contradiction to their very natures. So and then you had to play in when the hell did you become a spy for Spade and how long have you been in Spade? I very much believe there's a gap in time. There's 2 time gaps with this whole flashback. The beginning is just to kind of establish them, and then we're going to jump ahead a little bit. That means I think there's more than just one event that transpired. I don't think it's just, oh, something happened and one of them died. I think there was an initial event and then an event that changed it. Meaning, eventually they got, I think the first event is what makes Morgan disillusioned with Yami, but somehow it ends up recruiting Nacht. Meaning that Nacht is part of the Black Bulls, but Morgan's still alive, but doesn't like Yami anymore. Then I think it jumps ahead a little bit, and then something happens that causes the original Nacht to die, Morgan to then end up taking up his name. But I'm assuming something with the Spade had to happen during that time, which we already knew took a while in the past anyway, because remember, Yuno was given off to the orphanage as a child, and that was like 15 or so years ago. So that implies that like there's been a decent gap in time between like, so that means we already know that like the Dark Triad took over like 15 years ago, right? About 15 or so years ago, 10 to 15 years ago. So that would imply to me that this initial flashback probably takes place when when that was first happening. Then we jump ahead a little bit in time, and then that's when Nacht, or Morgan, renaming himself as Nacht, chooses to become like a spy for the Clover Kingdom. I think it's 2 separate events. I don't think it's as simple as fucking the original Morgan died and Nacht just took on his appearance. Especially when they mentioned you have shadow magic and the original Nacht didn't have shadow magic. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Why didn't you mention the fact that that's not Nacht? Like, why was Jack's thing that you didn't have the magic and that's not your name? That's what he should have said. He goes, that original person, and then I think Nacht's response is like, that original person is dead. Meaning maybe, just like their hair were contradictions, their abilities could have been contradictions. That Nacht didn't have shadow magic. The original Nacht didn't have shadow magic. He probably had like a light magic. And Morgan, who looks like the current Nacht, did have shadow magic. That's my guess. Because then Jack's response would be, wait a minute, Nacht didn't have, like, you didn't have shadow magic. Well, of course, because the original Nacht didn't have shadow magic. That's my guess. The fact that their hair colors already contradict, it wouldn't surprise me if their powers contradicted. That the original Nacht had light magic and like Morgan had shadow magic. Although it's still weird. I hope we get to see Jack in the flashback to understand how much he saw, because obviously I think Jack was in a different group. But still, I want to know, because it's gonna kind of piece. Black Clover actually has a relatively interesting timeline. The fact that like certain Captain Squad leaders are different then than they are now, and characters like Zara, who is very important in the grand scheme of things. Like there's like it's funny that like some of the history with Black Clover's lore that's interesting is the lore behind the Captain Squads and who had what. Like we don't even know the original captains of certain groups. Like Blue Rose, hell, we don't even know the vice captains for certain groups yet. Like Blue Rose, I don't know who the vice captain of the Blue Roses are. Same thing. Well, we know Kirst is for the Peacocks, for the Floral Peacocks. We know Dorothy's vice captain is Kirst, but like for some of the other ones, we don't. So that's the part that's interesting to me. But I very much believe that the story of Morgan and Nacht and Yami is not as like one time frame. Some shit happened. I mean, think about it. And to give an example of what I mean about Tabata not always taking the easy route, the way we find out about Asta's mother had nothing to do with Asta directly. If anything, Asta's mother's flashback takes place after whatever happened with her and Asta is done. It's implied, like, the only thing that's implied through Asta's mom's flashback is that, oh, I'm not going to let this happen again. Meaning, whatever had happened with Asta, she didn't want to repeat the same mistake with Libe and got killed for it. Like, that's all we know. We don't know Asta's origins of a character and whether or not it ties in. Because a lot of people also think that Nacht has some relation to Asta. Maybe. I don't know. We know the Faust family. Faust is not a name, and any other character you've seen in fiction with that name usually deals with some dark shit. So there's a high chance that, like, the original Nacht kind of decided to go with Yami, but something happened on a mission that caused Morgan to be disillusioned with Yami, and then they started getting into devil shit, which probably caused the original Nacht's death, in which Morgan then pretended to be Nacht after gaining the abilities of because he mentions how, like, the only reason why he's alive is because he doesn't forgive unjust evil, which tells me his brother probably died and he ended up gaining the powers of a devil through his anger and hatred of what happened to him. And he, like, understands, and that Yami probably smokes as a memento to the original Nacht. Because it makes no sense for the original Nacht to have changed his appearance to Morgan, and then Yami picked up his smoking habit that he dropped. I don't know, that just seems weird to me. I think it's the other way around. I think the original Nacht is dead. Morgan took his brother's name, and fucking Yami smoked in the legacy of the guy who died. Why would he smoke in the why would he just take up the habit from another person? He also doesn't talk about his brother like that. He just goes, that person's dead. So I don't know if their relationship is even good. We know he doesn't like Yami, so we know that Yami's probably partially responsible. And it also had to be something that wasn't, like, explicitly Yami's fault. But it also had to be something that wasn't, like, well known. It had to be an event that only featured maybe 3 or 4 people. Probably Yami, Nacht, Morgan, and maybe Julius to a lesser extent. It's a very hidden family event. Because remember, the Faust family is also just fucking gone. That's the other thing that's interesting. Meaning their parents were probably dealing with some dark dealings in the first place, which probably led into the shit that happens in the flashback, which leads into one of the brothers dying or getting fucked over in some way. And the only reason why the other brother didn't die is because his anger and hatred of unjust evil allowed him compatible to make a pact with the devil, or devils in his case. Or maybe it was a devil at the time, became multiple devils over time because of how he handles things. And he probably has a disillusionment with the Clover. Well, no, because he's still... I'd be curious. I don't know. That's why, because a lot of people also mention that he seems to flip between personalities. People are implying that maybe he seems more like the original Nacht in certain situations, but he also seems like his original self in other situations. Some people are also thinking it's fusion. I don't think it's that. I think he very much is still trying to maintain. I think he's still his good self, Morgan, but he has definitely picked up some of his brother's, like, nastier thought process. But we don't know how deep it goes. We don't know what the original Nacht wants to do because we don't know enough about the flashback. These are just things I'm, like, theory crafting. But I don't think it's as simple as Morgan died, Nacht took on his appearance, and Yami picked up Nacht's original smoking habit. I think it's the opposite. I think literally Morgan died. No, that Nacht, the original Nacht died. Morgan took his name, and Yami picked up the original Nacht smoking habit. Because the other way doesn't make any fucking sense. It's obvious that smoking comes from Nacht, old Nacht. It doesn't come from, like, Yami just didn't start smoking. I think he smoked, and it could be that Yami was traumatized. Yami doesn't even have facial hair in the flashback, which means, and remember, we know that, like, Yami is the way Yami's portrayed in Black Clover is like the already accomplished shonen hero. Well, there is no shonen hero that always wins every single time, and there's no loss whatsoever. We have yet to get to, like, his loss. I think this is going to be Yami's, like, maturing, sobering up loss. And it's going to be the death of one of the brothers. The gamble is which one died. We know one of them is dead. To me, there's no doubt in my mind one of them is dead. I just think it's the original Nacht that's dead, not Morgan. But leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. Sorry if this was confusing. If you guys want me to explain it more in the chat and then in the comment section below, leave a comment, we'll discuss it. But that's very much what I believe. That the original Morgan has taken his brother's name. And Yami took his smoking as mementos. And I think Morgan probably also took a little bit of his personality. And it could be some dark dealings where they kind of ended up sharing magic. We also know that every devil union, except for maybe Asta, has 2 different types of magic. We know, hell, even fucking Nacht, I think, has like the demon stuff, and then he also has his shadow magic. So, I don't know. We'll see in the coming weeks. This week, I'm hoping it'll prove. I hope it's more than what people are thinking. Because if it's literally that fucking Morgan died, Nacht changed his appearance, and Yami took up Nacht's smoking habits, like, that's not as interesting to me. But the other one, I'm also curious because we'll get more lore into the history of the captains. We know who used to be captains in certain squads, but we don't have the full picture. Because we have yet to see the old Magic Knight captains, even the old, we don't even know who the Wizard King was before Julius. So if Yami's still in Grey Deer, I'm hoping Julius is also still captain of Grey Deer, so we get to see the old the old Wizard King, which may or may not play in part with this flashback. It could be through this whole situation that Julius obtained the title of Wizard King. Hell, the old Wizard King may have done some fucked up shit. We don't know. This might be how the old Wizard King dies. There's a bunch of shit that can come from this, so I'm looking forward to it. Leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. Life's a game, play to win, and remember, you're not having any fun if you're not going just a little bit crazy. Peace off.